Lights, camera, action.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about what is revered as one of the greatest James Bond films of all time. Yes, that's right. We are talking about none other than Skyfall. Now, if you haven't seen this movie before, go ahead and pause this episode. You can watch this movie on Amazon Prime. It is streaming for free. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out and then come right back here and give us a listen. So without further ado, Em, you have some film details for us?
I do. So this film was released on November 9th of 2012. It was directed by Sam Mendes. It is starring Daniel Craig, Javier Bardem. Is that how you say his last name?
Yes.
Okay. Judi Dench and Naomi Harris. It was distributed by Sony Pictures. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 23 minutes. It's rated PG-13. Its budget was $200 million, but its box office total was $1.1 billion.
Wow. Yeah, I do remember when I was researching for the film that it was the second highest grossing film of 2012.
Yes. I can't remember what it was right behind. What was it?
Marvel's The Avengers.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep, that was the number one grossing movie of 2012.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right, well, I also have some fun facts.
Okay.
So I will dive right in. So the first one that I have is that, so during the whole, chase at the beginning, before they hop on the train, they're, James Bond is chasing after this bad guy on like mopeds or motorcycles or whatever.
Yes.
Well, the bikes kept sliding all over the road while they were rehearsing this.
Okay.
And so someone had the idea to spray Coca-Cola all over the road.
Really?
To help with the traction because, as it dried, it got stickier. Yeah. And so they sprayed Coca-Cola all over the road, and that's how you were able to, get through the road without slipping.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense why it would work, but never heard of anything like that.
And I don't know that I would have ever come up with that kind of solution. But
yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
And I also read that actually Coke Zero was like one of the endorsers or sponsors or whatever for this episode,
movie.
Or not episode, movie.
Right.
But, and so they were going to try to use that, but since it's zero sugar, it wasn't sticky enough.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the next one is, so when James, reappears after quote unquote dying,
right,
at M's house.
Yes.
That was actually filmed at John Barry's house, and he was actually the person who came up with the Bond theme, and he scored 11 of the movies.
Okay.
He passed away the year before this movie came out, so they felt that this would be a good tribute to him to film M's house at his house.
That's really cool that they would make her house his. That's a really cool, real world integration of the Bond mythos, which is huge, by the way. The history of the character of James Bond and character acquisition, everything, super rich history.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Next one. Daniel Craig performed most of the stunts himself, including the fight scene on top of the train car. And it was traveling 50 kilometers, which is about 31 miles per hour if you convert it. But he did all of those stunts himself.
Wow, that's very impressive.
I know. Next one. Sean Connery was Mendes' top choice to play Kincaid.
Yes.
But the filmmakers ultimately decided not to cast him because they thought it might be confusing for audiences, which, for those of you who don't know, Sean Connery played James Bond in,
he was one of I think he was the very first James Bond ever.
I think you're right, yeah.
And definitely the most famous actor to play James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a poll done to see, which James Bond actor was audience's favorite, and I believe even today he's still people's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so I saw that too, that they thought about bringing him in to play Kincaid, but they thought it might be too gimmicky and confusing, so they decided not to. And
they also had thought that he might not even be willing to do it if they asked him, because somebody had asked him about coming out of retirement to be in Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't. So they figured he might not even be willing to.
Yeah.
Next fact. So Javier Bardem, who plays
Mr. Silva.
Mr. Silva. Sorry, I blanked on the name.
No, it's okay.
Had the script translated into Spanish for himself so that he could better understand and interpret the character he was playing. And he was commended greatly for this, just because it showed his dedication and commitment. And I mean, you can see his commitment in his performance too. He does an awesome job. But yeah, it was just to kind of help him better play the character because the Spanish is his first language. I read that too. One thing I saw was that Sam Mendes, the director, was lobbying very hard for the villain to be played by Javier Bardem. Yes.
And Javier was kind of on the fence, like he was interested but not sold. And they kept working with him. And when he finally asked for it to be translated into Spanish, they felt like that was just a huge like confidence boost for him, for them, that like he was for sure finally going to do it.
Right. So another fact is that Kevin Spacey was actually offered a role in this movie.
Really?
It was not disclosed which role it was, but it's believed that it would have been for the role of Silva or somebody else. They're not sure. But yeah, so he had to turn it down because of scheduling conflicts.
Interesting.
Next, the opening scene. So, you know, the one that I was just talking about with the trains.
Yes.
It took 4 months to prep, 3 months to rehearse, and 2 months to shoot. So 9 months total.
Yeah. And
there were 400 crew members involved with the production of this scene too.
Wow.
So a lot went into it.
Yeah.
Also, when they were trying to come up with the title for this movie, obviously they landed on Skyfall, but before they chose that title, they had 2 others that they had considered. The first one was called Once Upon a Spy, and then they decided to do away with that one, and then the second one they came up with was Nothing Is Forever.
Nothing Is Forever isn't too bad.
Right.
I kind of like that one.
I didn't like Once Upon a Spy.
Yeah, I don't like that either. It feels... I mean, I think it would work maybe for back in the 60s and 70s, like when Bond was first getting going.
Right.
But it feels like it doesn't fit with Daniel Craig's Bond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And my last fact is that, so in the scene where they're in this, I don't know, like a restaurant, I guess, when there's like the fight scene when James turns in that coin to be...
They were in a casino.
A casino.
Yes.
Thanks. I just remember wine being served.
Yes.
So, in the fight scene when they fall into the Komodo dragon pit, I guess you would call it, the Komodo dragons were completely CGI, and they didn't even use real ones in the scenes where like the actors were not like in the same shot as them or anything. And Mendes, the director, said that it was an absolute nightmare and he would never use CGI animals again.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that they used entirely CGI animals. I am a little bit surprised that they wouldn't use them for shots that the actors weren't even in. Mm-hmm. But to be fair, I mean, Komodo dragons are extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that there'd be a lot of them that are even in those like Hollywood production circles, you know, because they're like handlers and trainers for like tigers and bears and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But Komodo dragons aren't even used in movies that often. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. But, all right. Well, that is all the facts that I have.
Okay. Well, I will jump into production details then. Let me get my notes pulled up. All right. So, Skyfall. Skyfall is Daniel Craig's third outing as James Bond. His first one was in the groundbreaking Casino Royale, and his second one was in the highly controversial Quantum of Solace. So they knew that after having a strong opening with Casino Royale and following up with kind of a lukewarm movie that was really received poorly by fans, that Skyfall had to be big. prior to Skyfall having its name, it was referred to as Bond 23 because that's how they refer to all the James Bond movies prior to them getting their name, is just its numerical value. So, for instance, Spectre was Bond 24, No Time to Die was Bond 25, which was a really big deal because, 25 movies, huge milestone. So anyways, development on Bond 23 began in 2009, but it was suspended throughout 2010 because of MGM's financial troubles. So for those of you who don't know, MGM owns the film rights to James Bond. Every single James Bond movie that's ever been produced, released, has been done through MGM, but the character rights are controlled by a family of producers. So originally, Albert R. Broccoli was the one who acquired the character rights to James Bond in 1961. And for the last 3 decades, his son and daughter have been the ones who've been in charge of the character since he passed. So when MGM started having financial troubles, they were on the brink of bankruptcy, everything kind of was put on hold. The Broccoli family started to think about maybe entertaining the idea of doing a Bond movie with a different studio. But they ultimately decided that they were going to stay with MGM during its crisis, which gave them a big leg up to be able to fine-tune the script. Because remember, they're following up Quantum of Solace, which is one of the worst Bond movies of all time, at least as far as fans view it. So they knew that this one had to be big, that there was a lot riding on it. So they chose to stay with MGM. They fine-tuned the script, and there's a reported minimum rewriting of the script of at least 5 times, but it was potentially more than that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you have the time.
Yeah, exactly. So they really worked on this one. I think the end product shows that it was the right decision to stay with MGM because this one is reviewed as one of the best Bond movies of all time. So when it was originally being planned, Bond 23 was supposed to follow up on the criminal organization Quantum, which was set up in Quantum of Solace, but after the lackluster response from fans and critics alike, producers started to entertain other ideas. So 2 of the ideas that producers and directors, Sam Mendes alike, felt should be included in the film were 1, the idea of the villain being a cyber terrorist who had a connection to MI6, and 2, Judi Dench's character of M dying at the end of the film. So, principal photography on the movie began on November 7th, 2011 in London. Some of the filming locations included London, England, Shanghai, China, and Istanbul, Turkey. And little fun fact about Istanbul, Turkey, that's where the opening scene was shot, where they're on the train and with the motorcycles and everything. When they were shooting specifically the train sequence, there were 2 teens that snuck onto the set while they were filming.
Really?
Yeah, they ended up being apprehended by security and escorted off the set, but there weren't really any details of, what they did or anything like that, but they broke onto the filming set and were discovered. So,
did they try to get in some of the shots or something?
I don't know. It doesn't say. It just says that they broke onto the set.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyways, and then filming wrapped on May 6th, 2012. And that is all that I have for production details. So, how would you score Skyfall on a scale of 1 to 100?
I've been starting a lot of these. I want to hear your rating first.
Okay, that's fair. I would rate Skyfall. It's hard for me to rate it because I know that currently Interstellar is the highest rated movie that I've done.
Me too.
And I don't think that I would rate this movie higher just because Interstellar I think is better.
I agree.
But Skyfall's a great movie. And it's hard for me to say. I would probably say I'm going to give it a 96.5.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And what did you give Interstellar? Do you remember?
I believe I gave it a 98.
I was not going to go that high. I was kind of leaning around maybe 93-ish.
Okay.
I don't know why. It is a really good movie, but I don't know. I struggle with whether I like Casino Royale better than this movie or not.
Yeah, that's fair.
I've only seen the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, but yeah, I don't know. I like those both. It might be a tie between them or possibly Casino Royale above.
Yeah, that's fair. Casino Royale is really good. I really like that one too. I would say out of Daniel Craig's entire Bond collection, that either Skyfall or Casino Royale is my favorite. I would say probably Skyfall. But Casino Royale is right there too.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie. I think what I like more about Skyfall is that it feels a little bit more true to the lineage of Bond. Just in that like in Casino Royale, Q wasn't even in the movie. And
yeah, that's true. And I do really like Q.
Yeah, I like Q too, and he's like a very important character in the Bond mythos.
Right.
Part of the problem is that the last Bond before Daniel Craig was Pierce Brosnan. And Pierce Brosnan started out really strong with GoldenEye. That was the very first movie that he did, which, fun James Bond fact, the same guy who wrote and directed Casino Royale also did GoldenEye. But anyways, back on track here. When Pierce Brosnan was James Bond, pretty much every movie after GoldenEye was not received well. GoldenEye was received extremely well, but all of his other movies were not received that well. And one of the main reasons was that people felt like, as far as reviews and critics go, that it was quote unquote over the top gadget antics, you know, like just borderline unrealistic and just kind of like an exploding pin and stuff like that. Like Q in this movie even kind of makes a jab at the Pierce Brosnan movies, kind of poking fun at that. Like
about the exploding pin.
Right. He's like, oh, exploding pins. We don't do that stuff anymore.
Right.
So he wasn't even in Casino Royale because they were really trying to keep the movie grounded and differentiate it from the Pierce Brosnan movies. And I don't have any problem with that because, as I already said, Casino Royale is a great movie and I really like it. But it's a very different James Bond movie.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, it like Skyfall has great car sequences when he's in the Aston Martin. It has the great ending action sequence, like really big action sequence in the house at Skyfall Ranch.
Yeah.
And like the villain is phenomenal. Villain is also great in Casino Royale. Mads Mikkelsen's villain in Casino Royale is great. But Javier Bardem's Mr. Silva and here is really phenomenal. He's just a phenomenal actor.
Right. And
I think part of why I like Skyfall so much is that the movie kind of, I don't know if I would say focuses on M, but she's one of the primary driving points of the plot. It's this connection between her and Mr. Silva.
Yes.
And for me, Judi Dench is phenomenal in this role. She does such a great job of playing M and being a stern, cold director. You know, like she gets things done, but is also, you know, calculating and I wouldn't say caring because she can't be, but she's present. Right. I guess.
As caring as she can be
in that position. Yeah, I would agree 100%. And I really felt like in Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale that M's involvement in the movie was very minimal. Like she was definitely there, not arguing that, but it almost was just kind of a earpiece, Bond, what are you doing type thing. Whereas this, she has a pretty big role and the motivation for the villain revolves entirely around her.
Right.
And I just think Judi Dench is a phenomenal actor and giving her more time to exercise that, as well as kind of her broken relationship with James, because she's the one that told Eve Moneypenny to take the shot, which killed him until they found out he was actually alive. I just really like the dynamics of this movie. Yeah. But
I agree. So what do you think would be some of your like top favorite scenes in this movie?
Good question. I think that probably my favorite scene in the entire movie is just the ending sequence, the battle at Skyfall Manor, Ranch, whatever you want to call it, James' childhood home. Just because it's a big action sequence,
Yeah.
There's not a lot of dialogue, and the stakes are really high. As the battle keeps evolving, you see that M was shot, but she kind of keeps it a secret to not distract James. And her and Kincaid are trying to escape underneath the house to get out to the church. And things look really promising for them until Mr. Silva notices them way off in the distance, and then he's kind of chasing them. And it's just, I think one of the major problems that a lot of movies have today are that sometimes it can feel like the stakes are non-existent. Like, for instance, in a lot of superhero movies, which I'm the biggest Marvel Comics nerd there is. I love DC too. But I will definitely say that there are some times where it feels like, well, you know that the superheroes are going to win at the end of the movie.
Right.
So it doesn't feel like the stakes are really there, which is why like Infinity War is a really solid movie because they actually lose.
Yeah.
You know, but so I feel like sometimes in movies today, you can feel like the stakes aren't really there. Even if like the movie tries to communicate it, you don't really believe it.
Right, yeah.
Or I also feel like sometimes you don't get to experience the main character, the protagonist, struggling. You know, for every good movie, TV show, whatever it is, the character needs to overcome something. And if there's no struggle, then wherever they end up, it doesn't feel as though they've earned it. You know, so for me, I think having James just really getting drilled relentlessly throughout this final battle, like he finally is able to escape the house, but then this massive fireball happens when he's underneath the house in the tunnel because the helicopter falls on the house. Well, you know, he has to kind of hide, and that's another struggle while he's trying to escape. Then he finally escapes and he realizes that Mr. Silva is going after him. So he has to go across the ice. Well, the ice starts to crack, but he says, I'm going to risk it anyways, and keeps going.
Then he gets shot at.
The ice cracks more. He makes the decision to just go all in, break the ice, fall underneath, and take a guy with him. Well, then once you're far enough underwater, it's hard to find your way back out. So he has to swim back down, find a flare, shoot it to light up the water so that he can find the hole, get out. Now he's in freezing water and gets out, and then has to get to M before Mr. Silva does to save her. You know, and then he finally does, and he kills Mr. Silva, but then M dies.
Right.
You know, it's just this constant struggle, this up and down battle of, oh yes, that's good. Oh no, I can't believe that just happened. You have this powerful dynamic constantly throughout that final end scene. And what I really, really love is the ending after James throws the knife and it hits Mr. Silva in the back, and he kind of walks towards him, falls on the ground. James goes up to him and he's holding her. And then him and Kincaid realize like it's too late, like she's not going to make it out of here type thing. He's holding her and she just kind of looks at him and she says, her last line is the character. She just looks at him and says, well, I did get one thing right. I love that. I love it so much because you quickly understand what the message is to the audience, that, you know, kind of the running thread of the entire movie is that M has made some horrible, horrible decisions that have had terrible, terrible consequences on innocent people.
People are dying because of her.
Exactly. And that she's responsible for all these things, and that she's just made these terrible decisions. But for her to be able to recognize and to be able to communicate to the audience that, hey, you did do some things right, in her words, one thing, specifically referring to James, you know, picking him out, raising him type thing, and whatever. I think that's huge. But what I really like about it is that they don't outright tell the audience. It's not hard to understand or comprehend what she's telling you, but it's just ambiguous enough to be powerful. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I would have to say that's probably my favorite set of scenes too. in the movie. I also really like leading up to that. I mean, I love Kincaid. And I love
me too.
when, when they first get to James' house, or parents' house, I guess.
Yes.
And just like the exchange between he and Kincaid, and also how, like, because James asks, if they're, or I guess he doesn't ask, but they go in to see like what weapons are there.
Yeah, he asks him if the house still has guns.
Yeah. And the fact that all of them are gone, but Kincaid held on to his dad's gun, and like, just that, like, in the beginning of all of the action scenes and sequences, that James is using his dad's gun and like that kind of thing. It's just like, I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
And then also it's very interesting to me that they included, like when Silva is about to walk into the little chapel or church or whatever.
Yes.
And he sees the headstone of
James's
parents,
father and mother.
Yes. Yeah. And that he like laughs to himself.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of powerful too, because it's like, I don't know how to really explain it other than just like, like, oh, it'd really be here,
Right, yeah.
And that kind of thing.
Yes.
But I just really like how they included those small details, and that, I mean, even though they're small, they're powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the cool part about that too, like, well, I guess first I'll agree with you 100%. I love Kincaid.
Mm-hmm.
For being such a like side character, minimal, doesn't have a lot of lines or involvement in the plot. He is really well acted.
Yes.
And I would say most people who watch it quickly fall in love with him just because he's a good character.
Right.
One of the things I love is Kincaid takes James out to shoot his dad's hunting rifle.
Mm-hmm.
They put the like teacups on the branch, and he tells James, he's like, now don't let it pull to the left or something like that.
Right. Just like I taught you.
Just like I taught you. And James is kind of like slightly offended and almost taken back to that childlike mentality when he says it. And he's like, I know, I think that's just a really great dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And then James blasts him, hits him dead on. And he's like, what'd you say you did for a living again?
Mm-hmm.
It's well played. I really love it. And I think what's really cool about the ending sequence is that the idea of like a last stand where the heroes are like outgunned completely.
Yeah.
That's a plot detail that's like as old as time, like that's in loads of Westerns.
Right.
I've seen it in like Star Wars cartoons and all that stuff, but that the good guys dig their feet in, they use ingenuity and they're creative, and they use what they have and they survive, they win, the good beats the evil.
Right.
And for being something that's just rehashed in all sorts of books and movies and TV shows, it's a great story mechanism.
Right.
It's fantastic. And I love seeing them take apart the shotgun shells and fix them into the light fixtures and like put bags of nails and screws around it so that when they turn on the light, it blasts that down onto the enemies. Like, I just think it for being such a simple, very common plot device, they executed it perfectly.
Right.
And I love that.
Yeah.
But
and kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, just when they were outgunned, I mean, that one scene when, they've basically exhausted all of the things that they created, I guess, like they, like you said, like with the shotgun shells and, like blew a ton of guys to smithereens, basically.
Right.
And then, James takes a mask off of one of the guys that's laying on the ground, and he's like, he's not here, referring to Silva.
Right.
And then you hear the music blasting from the helicopter that's coming in, and it's just like, and then, I mean, when the helicopter lands, you see a ton of guys get out of the helicopter, and it's like, oh, great, what are they going to do now? Because, everything that they had set up is
they just used everything
already used, you know? And so I think that's really cool too, just because like it builds the suspense and it just like leaves you on the edge of your seat. So it's good.
Yeah, I think that one thing that this movie does masterfully is create a lot of different scenes, like different settings, different plot points that never feel like they're too much.
Right.
Like the movie doesn't feel like, oh, this is exhausting. Now what are we doing? Type thing. Like it's all interesting. It's all woven together very well. But just like, for example, another scene that I like just because it's visually interesting and I think it's executed well and I enjoy watching it is when they're in Shanghai and that assassin is in that, I don't know, I guess you call it a penthouse, and he's cutting out a piece of the glass so that he can shoot somebody from across the skyline. And James is like trying to sneakily get through there because there's all these reflections because like all the walls are glass.
Right.
And you have that huge, like, I guess billboard. I don't know what's in the background, but it's got like scrolling letters and a jellyfish.
Yeah, like the glowing, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's just like, there's no dialogue at all in that scene, but you can feel the tension, especially when James opens the door and the guy looks because he sees a reflection move and James has to hold it there perfectly so that he just sees the jellyfish. He doesn't see James. Like the stakes are really high because James could have blown it right there, but there's no dialogue. You can still feel all the tension. And it's just very visually stunning and fun to watch play out.
Yeah.
So I like that scene too.
And I mean, I think it's especially tense because, I mean, that's James' first, what's the word?
It's like his first mission.
His first
back
mission
in the field.
before, after he was dead, you know? And so it's like, okay, even though it's not explicitly said that he didn't pass all of his trainings and that kind of thing.
Until later.
Until later.
Yeah.
You know that he didn't just because of the way that M says that he passed and things.
Yeah.
So it just like, it makes it that much more tense because it's like, okay, this is the first time he's out since he got shot off the train. And it's, I mean, you can tell that he's not what he used to be.
Right.
So, like, especially because, like, when he is doing all the trainings and stuff and the tests and everything, like, he could not shoot straight and so it's just, it makes it that much better, I think.
Right. Yeah. It definitely, there's a lot more writing on it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. Fun fact, too. So, right before that scene where he's in that skyline glass room with the other assassin, is when Eve Moneypenny shows up at his hotel room or whatever, and she ends up shaving him because he was about to shave for the first time because he's been all scraggly from quote unquote retirement. She actually, the actress, I can't think of her name now.
Naomi Harris.
Naomi Harris. Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say Haley something, but I knew it was wrong. So Naomi Harris actually learned how to shave another person with a straight razor, which is super impressive.
Yeah.
I don't remember how many hours she had to do it, but basically went to barber school just for that to be able to actually do it in camera.
I think I had read it was like 3 hours or something like that.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
I mean, it's just not a skill that people have anymore.
Right.
And to actually have done it like in the shot,
the fact that they didn't use a fake razor or anything.
Yeah, that's super wild to me. And it just, I don't know, it makes the movie that much cooler. But yeah. So I know you kind of said that you would say the ending sequence is like your favorite. Do you have any other scenes that you really like or that you would say are your favorite?
I do like the opening scene, just like with like the chase through the city and first they start out in cars and then on bikes and then on the train and and I especially like it now that I know, they use Coca-Cola and it was actually Daniel Craig doing the stunts. Like it just makes it more enjoyable to watch knowing the things behind the scenes. I also really like when James is, right after Silva escapes and James is like hunting him down through the subway station.
Yes.
And like, the Q tells him that he's dressed like a policeman and James is like, of course he is, and just like him having to track him down and then jumping onto the end of the subway car, getting in.
Yep.
And I also really like when, Silva is in the car ahead of him. James is in a different car, but they see each other, but they are
Yep.
forced to just stand there. Like
Right.
they
'Cause they're
can't
on a
chase each
train.
other. What's going to happen?
Exactly.
They're on a train.
Yeah.
So, and then, as soon as the doors open, it's like, boom, they're off. And so I really like that sequence too.
Yeah. That's a great sequence. I agree. Well, is there anything else that you want to cover in this week's episode?
I think that's it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you for joining us again. We really had a lot of fun talking about this episode. I know it's one of my personal favorite movies. Next week, we're going to be covering Tron Legacy, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It is currently streaming on Disney+, so if you haven't seen it and you're wanting to, you can check it out on there. But we really appreciate you guys joining us and giving us some love on YouTube with that thumbs up, leaving us a comment. You'd be surprised how big a difference the thumbs up makes, but if you have time for it, it only takes literally 1 second, so we'd appreciate it. We hope you have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.